Ted Williams gunning for a 400 season. He's hitting an even 400. I think if I were Ted, I would sit out today, but Ted never backed into anything. Dick Fowler, the pitcher for the Philadelphia A's. Here's the pitch to Williams. Line drive, base hit. Ted Williams a hit in his first at bat.
Imagine the summer of 1941. America has not yet known the horrors of war. Stadiums are full of spectators, and all the newspapers write about one man. His name is Ted Williams. Every time he goes to bat, it becomes an event. The crowd freezes. The pitcher nervously squeezes the ball, and then a strike. The ball flies into the sky, the crowd roars, and the statistics are rewritten right before your eyes. That season, he did what no one else could do. He finished the year with a 406 mark. And to this day, he is called the last man to hit 400. But Ted Williams was more than an athlete. He was a pilot, a warrior, a man who sacrificed records for the sake of his country. This is the story of a genius, a perfectionist, and a hero who showed that perfection is possible. In 1918, in sunny San Diego, a boy was born who would go down in baseball history as one of the greatest hitters of all time. His name was Theodore Samuel Williams. The family lived modestly. His father worked various small jobs. His mother was deeply involved in the Salvation Army and spent her days helping the poor. Ted grew up in a home where money was never abundant, but there was always enough strictness and discipline. From an early age, he was drawn to baseball. While other boys ran barefoot along the beach, he spent hours practicing his swings and throws. It seemed to him that the ball was his destiny, and the bat was an extension of his arm. Williams was a skinny teenager, but even then there was something special hidden in his eyes, an obsession with perfection. Neighbors recalled that young Ted could stand at the net until dark, hitting one served ball after another. He did not just play. He learned to control every millimeter of space between himself and the ball. In those years, few people guessed that on the dusty streets of San Diego, a future genius was growing up, whose strokes would become the standard for entire generations of players. For Ted, baseball quickly ceased to be entertainment. He saw it as a science. He believed that the correct swing could be brought to absolute perfection, and it was this desire that made him different. While his peers played for fun, from his youth he treated every stroke as if history depended on it. In the late 1930s, young Ted's persistence finally paid off. He was noticed by scouts and offered to try his hand at professional baseball. A tall, thin guy with a bold look and an almost fanatical passion for hitting, he quickly found himself in the Boston Red Sox system. There, he went from being an unknown rookie to one of the most talked about young players in the country. In 1939, at the age of 20, Ted Williams first took the field as part of the Red Sox. And his debut was loud. He finished the season with one of the best batting rates in the league. Journalists wrote that a new phenomenon had appeared, a player who had no fear of pitching and whose instincts behind the bat were almost flawless. What distinguished Williams from many others? He treated baseball as an art. For him, every hit was a separate picture, where everything was important: the angle of the swing, the speed of the hands, the movement of the eyes, the position of the feet. He could study his own mistakes for hours, practicing hundreds of hits in a row until his body did everything perfectly. From the first seasons, it became clear. This was not just a talented guy, this was a future star. Boston, thirsty for new heroes, found a player who could give hope and inspiration. But ahead of him were not only records, but also trials that tore him away from the game during the brightest years of his career. 1941 went down in the annals of baseball as the year when one man did the impossible. The focus of the entire country was on Ted Williams, a tall, thin guy from the Boston Red Sox, who saw baseball not as a game, but as a mathematical problem requiring a perfect solution. His goal was clear: to reach a mark that others could only dream of. At that time, an average of over 300 was considered the pinnacle of skill. But Ted was not one to be satisfied with the ordinary. His eyes literally burned into the ball as it left the pitcher's hand. It was as if he were watching slow-motion film, with each pitch revealing its secrets. He waited, he was patient, he took his time, and then he delivered a blow that made the stands explode with delight. As the season wore on, the nation watched his numbers. Newspapers reported his every outing, and kids ran to the newsstands to ask, "Is he holding 400s?" His numbers fluctuated, sometimes falling below the coveted mark, but Williams stubbornly brought them back. He hit as if he were challenging himself, and that challenge became personal to each fan. By the end of the season, his batting average was .39955. The club's executives suggested that they leave it as is, rounding his stats to 400. For any other player, that would have been a godsend. But Ted was different. He rejected the offer and said, "I'll play. If I deserve 400, I'll earn it on the field." On September 30th, he went against the Philadelphia Athletics. In the first game, he hit 4 for 5. In the second, 2 for 3. In total, he hit 6 for 8. His season total, 406, a mark that no one else could match. The crowd at the stadium applauded him standing up, and journalists wrote that they had witnessed a miracle. But Ted himself perceived it differently. For him, it was not a feat, not a miracle, but the result of work, thousands of hours of training, evenings spent alone at the net. He did not want glory. He wanted perfection. And that year, he proved that perfection exists. Since then, he has been called the last man to hit 400, and this phrase sounds like a title worthy of a king. His season of 1941 became not only a record, but also a symbol. A symbol of the fact that true greatness does not come easy. It is forged through sweat, stubbornness, and uncompromisingness. When Ted Williams finished his legendary 1941 season with a mark of 406, it seemed that he was ready for a decade of records that would forever rewrite baseball. But fate decreed otherwise. That December, America entered World War II, and baseball players, citizens like everyone else, began to go to the front. Ted didn't enlist right away. Many thought his star status would protect him from the military, but he refused the privileges. In 1942, he volunteered for the U.S. Navy and later transferred to the Marine Air Corps. There, he underwent rigorous training and became a combat fighter pilot. His instructors noted that he had a sniper's eye and reaction time that even experienced pilots lacked. What helped him see a baseball at 90 miles an hour now saved his life in the sky. He spent almost 5 years in the Army, years that could have been the most productive in his baseball career. Many are sure that if not for the war, he would have broken Babe Ruth's records. But for Williams, duty was more important than statistics. When the war ended, he returned to the Red Sox and began collecting hits again, as if those years had never been interrupted. His talent was still there, but fate decided to test him one more time. In the early 50s, during the Korean War, Williams was drafted into the Army again. This time he flew combat missions in Korea, piloting a F-9F Panther jet fighter. His comrade in arms was future astronaut John Glenn. Once his plane was shot down and engulfed in flames, but Williams managed to land the plane, avoiding disaster. He could have died dozens of times, but he returned to the sky again. And again, these were the years that were not in his baseball statistics, but which forever became part of his legend. In total, Ted Williams lost almost 5 years of his career in the wars. And yet, even with these losses, his statistics remained among the best in baseball history. And this is what makes him special. He was not only a great athlete, but also a hero who sacrificed himself for his country. When the war died down, Boston welcomed him back like a lost star. Fenway Park was breathing early spring, the green wall beckoned, and Ted Williams took his place at bat again, as if the long years of khaki uniforms, practice flights, and the smell of kerosene had not happened. He had always treated hitting as a science, and now that science was even more rigorous, he studied the shadows of the visors, the wind, the subtle turns of the pitcher's wrists, like a geometer drawing diagrams in the air. In 1946, he returned not just as a player, but as a master who remembered the silence of the front, bringing with him the calm of a pilot and the look of a man who knows how to wait for the perfect moment. The season turned into a fireworks show. Boston moved forward as if he were pulling a string from a single swing, and the city once again believed that the game could be a holiday. Williams took the league's highest individual award, a sign not just of brilliance, but of recognition of his system. Endless repetitions, patience, precision. The following year, he proved that the pinnacle of success is not an accident. His ruler-like swing divided the field into perfect angles, and balls flew where gloves could not. He had collected the Triple Crown, the rarest of all batting crowns, when one man is the best in average long-range power and scoring. It was not a momentary spark. It looked like a method, like the consistent work of an engineer for whom every pitch is a problem with a single correct solution. Opponents tried everything, pumping up the speed, hiding the pitch, drawing inside and outside trajectories on him, stretching him out to chase a bad ball. He wouldn't give in. Ted waited. He could stand at the bat like a sculptor at a block of marble until he saw the right line in the stone. And when it appeared, the strike sounded hollow and clear, like a finger on the rim of a crystal glass. The league said he had a sniper's eye, and that was not a figure of speech. The ability to see and choose, and not pounce on the first thing that came along, was the essence of his talent. The press, of course, did not always sing in unison. Williams did not strive to please. He did not smile for the sake of headlines, did not give empty words, and painfully experienced hack work, his own and others. He could argue with reporters, snap back at a question, avoid unnecessary pomp, but he stayed longer than anyone else on the children's track in front of the locker room. He explained, "Don't chase strength, chase the right ball." He taught them to look, breathe, wait. And this contradiction, tough on the world and caring for those who just picked up the bat, only further molded his image. Then fate pulled the emergency brake again. The Korean War returned him to the sky. He already knew what it was like to hear a metallic voice in his headphones and not the roar of the stands. And yet he went where he was needed. Combat sorties, risk, fire, years that are not in the numbers of baseball tables, but which forever remained a line in his biography. One can argue what he would have achieved if life had allowed him to live every spring and every fall with a bat in his hands. But this is the paradox of Williams. Even a career cut short by fate shines like a standard. Returning again, he discovered that his body had become more capricious, and the game, faster. He responded as best he could. He brought his science of hitting to its utmost purity. He discarded all that was superfluous, hesitation, the desire to please, the fear of missing, and left only choice and moment. His percentage of on-base hits rose so high that it seemed that in almost every second appearance he found a way to first. This drove opponents crazy and delighted those who loved baseball, not only for the fireworks of power hits, but also for the chess-like depth of the duel between pitcher and batter. Boston saw how he aged beautifully, not carelessly, but stubbornly. He knew the value of every bolt in his own mechanism. He placed his palm on the handle of the bat a little differently, shifted his weight a split second earlier, caught the rare days when his shoulders were light and his gaze sharp as a needle. And on such evenings, time seemed to make way for him. Balls were flying into the cracks between people and grass again. The crowd sighed, first quietly, then loudly. And the statistics were compiled into graphs, where the talent curve resisted age. You can argue about when his career was greatest. In his youth, when every shot was a challenge, or after the wars, when every hit was a confirmation not only of skill, but also of will. But one thing is clear, returning again and again, he weighed not only his strength and technique, but also the experience of a man who saw the world from the height of the cockpit. And that is why his play in the post-war years felt deeper, like music, where there are fewer notes but more meaning. He will give this city many more evenings that essay masters will write about and argue at the bar. But he has already done the main thing. He proved that perfection is possible, not as a flash, but as discipline, not as luck, but as a system. And so, every time he went to bat during those years was not just an episode in a match. It was a lesson for those who believe that beauty in sports is born from patience. By the end of the 50s, Ted Williams was already a legend, a living baseball classic. His body was getting tired more and more often. Injuries were making themselves felt. But he still went out on the field, clutching the bat with the same fanatical concentration as 20 years ago. He was not going to go quietly. In 1960, at the age of 42, he played his last season, and he did it the way he always did, brightly and proudly. His batting average was over 300 again, which seemed like a miracle for a veteran. But the real story happened in his final game at Fenway Park. In his last attempt at bat, he swung and sent the ball over the fence. A home run in his last outing was a symbolic touch that only Ted himself could have come up with. The crowd erupted in screams, people realizing that they were witnessing a unique moment. But, true to form, Williams did not take a lap of honor or remove his cap. He simply ran the bases, head down, as if to say, "I did what I had to do." And that's how he went out, not in tears or applause, but in silent majesty that left fans with an eternal image. Ted Williams, the last night of perfection at bat. Ted Williams left the field, but his shadow remained forever on Fenway Park and throughout baseball. In 1966, his name was in the Hall of Fame, and no one doubted that it would be inevitable. After all, he had become synonymous with excellence at bat. To some, he was the great splinter, to others, the last man to hit 400, but they all agreed on one thing. He brought the art of hitting to an absolute peak. His 406 in 1941 remains unbroken to this day. Every attempt to match it ends in failure, and this is what makes Williams' achievement an eternal symbol of unattainable perfection. Coupled with his military service, almost 5 years taken from his career, he became a figure of much more than just an athlete. He was a hero who could be a soldier and a pilot, but always returned to where his heart beat, to the baseball diamond. For Boston, he remains an icon. The city where fans experience the game as a drama preserves his name as much as its greatest sons. But beyond the sport, he has become a legend too, an example of how a person can combine genius and discipline, talent and sacrifice. Today, when people talk about the greatest baseball players of all time, the name Ted Williams always sounds. For some, he is the best hitter in history. For others, a hero who was a few seasons short of breaking Ruth's records. But one thing is certain, his legacy is not in the numbers, but in the ideal he left behind. He showed that the pursuit of perfection can be the highest form of art. The story of Ted Williams is the story of a man who turned swinging a bat into an art. He was a perfectionist obsessed with the idea of perfection, and he proved to the world that a dream can become a reality. A 406 mark that no one has been able to match to this day. But his greatness was not limited to baseball. He went to war twice, sacrificing records for his country, and yet he returned to give the public the magic of the game once again. He didn't try to please everyone, didn't seek cheap fame, but he left something that time can't erase. The image of baseball's last great romantic, a man who never settled for less than perfection. Ted Williams left this life the same way he left the field, restrained, without pathos. But every time the ball rises above the stadium and the crowd freezes in anticipation of a miracle, his legacy lives on in that moment.